everyone. In this lecture, we will discuss about the Indian satellites. The Indian satellites can be divided in two parts. So, the first one is what we call as the Indian Remote Sensing Satellite. We call it as an IRS. And the other one is the Indian National Satellite, that is the INSAT, or what we call as a GSAT. Now, let's learn a bit difference between both of them. The IRS, that is the Indian Remote Sensing Satellite, is first thing they are generally placed at the low Earth orbit, the LEO. As we have already discussed, the LEO is at the height of like 400 to 2000 kilometers, and more importantly, these satellites are generally the polar orbiting. On the other hand, the INSAT satellite, these are generally placed at the geosynchronous orbit or the geostationary orbit. So I'll do one thing, I'll discuss the IRS first and then I'll discuss about the INSAT. Now here, when we say the IRS satellite, so as I told you, they are LEO with the polar orbiting, and when you see them the same time in the sun, what we call them as a synchronous orbit. Synchronous orbit. So they are mostly fixed or hung at the same time. So every day at a same local time they will be there. Apart from that, some of it are example like the IRS 1, 2, 3, or it can be the resource sat. Another example can be the RESAT. RESAT is basically the radar imaging satellite. Radar imaging satellite. So this is generally used for the coastal security. And RESAT 2 is also there. RESAT 2 is basically for the resources. So there's a RESAT 1 that is for the coastal security, and the RESAT 2 which is for the resources. Similarly, we have OceanSat. OceanSat is basically for the oceanographic data. Similarly, there is a SCATSat. The SCATSat is for the cyclone prediction and the sea surface temperature estimation. For for the data, it uses scatometer. We will discuss these things later. But yes, the SCATSat is basically used for the cyclone predictions and the sea surface temperature, mainly for the marine activities. Similarly, we have the AstroSat. The AstroSat is basically for the astronomical data and the Indian telescope. So this is mainly for the IRS. For the INSAT and the GSAT, so if you cannot say that why we sometimes call it as an INSAT or why we call it as GSAT, so just remember this thing, both of them are completely same, there's no difference between them. The only difference is when a satellite is launched from India, from Sriharikota, it is called as a INSAT. But when it is launched from other continent, like for example the French, the Ariana, if we launch from the other country, we call it as a GSAT. So from when we launching from our country, that's INSAT. From other country, we call it as a GSAT. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, everything is same. So they are generally placed at the geo orbit. So they can be at the equator, or they can be circular orbit itself. They are still like INSAT 1, 2, 3. These are the generation of these things. And more importantly, as they have to be launched to a very great height, 36,000, so they are heavier satellite. So that's why they are placed in the geostationary orbit. More importantly, these satellites have been generally between a 60-degree north and south. They are placed, so that this is what we call the satellite footprint sometimes. So it's just nothing to remember, but a point to be noted down if you want. And there are multiple bands in it. They are generally a communication satellites. They are for the communication satellites mainly. So these are the mainly. So if you see a dish antenna, so yes, dish antenna generally uses these INSAT satellite, and if you see the dish antenna always face southwards, and its size depends on the wavelength also. That's why we have AKU bands. We'll discuss them later. So these are the main difference between the INSAT, GSAT, and the IRS satellites. We'll discuss more detail about the PSLVs and the GSLV in the next lecture. Thank you.